You're watching a replay of Brain Drain with Rich Cabaceres. For more videos just like this, hit that red subscribe button.
And good morning. You're listening to Brain Drain on the legendary 1480 WSAR, broadcasting from our studios in Somerset, Massachusetts. I'm Rich Cabaceres, and it's good to be here the day after a special election, because we get to talk about something other than education for a change. And you know what we're going to talk about? One of my favorite go-tos. We're going to talk about what is your state legislation doing around this country? What are different state legislators doing to make sure that they're representing you? And there's no better way to show that than crazy legislation that's being proposed all over this country. And I know you've probably picked up the paper in the past couple of days, maybe the past week, and you've probably noticed that in Rhode Island you got some wacky state senators who are talking about throwing a $20 fee on internet porn access. And this is coming right after net neutrality has just gone away, and all chaos is potentially going to happen because the net neutrality going away was the end of the world. And now we're seeing in Rhode Island a couple of state senators are saying, hey, if you want to access any internet pornography at all, you're going to have to pay a $20 quarterly fee. Interesting. How does that make you feel? Do you think that those folks are representing you? And I know when you actually look at it, you say, hey, why are they going after pornography? Well, maybe because of the fact that that's probably one of the top things that's looked at on the internet. Pornography. It's greater than Google searches. It's greater than Facebook pornography. Can you believe that? But anyway, now they're saying in order to access pornography, you have to pay $20 to the state of Rhode Island every single quarter. How they're going to track that, I don't know. But congratulations to Rhode Island to making the top of the list for the craziest legislation that's being proposed in 2017 and 2018. Also on that list, we have New York, who made the list for illegal. It's illegal for you to use unarmed drones for hunting. So they tag these things death drones. And they're saying in New York that you can't go and hunt with an unarmed drone because it gives an unfair advantage to the hunter. Well, you know, hunting is an unfair advantage already to the hunter. So now we're saying that they can't use certain things to track down their prey. I don't know. Let me know what you think. 508-673-1480 to join the conversation. Also, you can join the conversation by going to the J&J Jewelers Facebook Live cam, commenting on Facebook Live in the feed below, because I come to you live every single Monday through Thursday, 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Brain Drain with Rich Cabaceres page. You can watch us on WSAR.com, Spindle City Autoglass Studio Cam. And to dive back into the conversation about some wacky legislation, how about in Texas? In Texas, they're making it, they're calling powdered alcohol the same as consuming an alcoholic beverage. I don't even know what powdered alcohol is. So if you know what powdered alcohol is, please call in 508-673-1480. Let me know what powdered alcohol is, because right now in Texas there is some legislation that was proposed that talks about how powdered alcohol is the equivalent of an alcoholic beverage. I've never consumed powdered alcohol. Is that the same as consuming a Tide Pod? I don't know. But one of the key points that I think we're going to pick up as time goes on, I talked about in Massachusetts how a bunch of state representatives and state senators voted a raise for themselves. And not only did they vote this massive raise, but they're being paid for, there's vacations for these state representatives and state senators that are being paid for by these lobbying groups. And one of those lobbying groups was the, what's the name of it? It's the it's the Israel Coalition for Action. There we go. The Israel Coalition for Action paid for everybody to go out to Israel. And there's a whole bunch of state representatives, state senators to go out there. And actually going back, it's because there was some proposed legislation in the House talking about how we should boycott, or we should not allow companies or do business with companies in the state who are boycotting Israel. So really, this was a pay-for-play thing. This whole trip to Israel, where people went and took the photo ops, and they went on these lavish trips, various state representatives went on these trips, all went because of one state representative who decided to file this legislation supporting this anti-everybody else agenda as opposed to supporting the people of Massachusetts. Now, you should ask yourself, what does boycotting Israel and the businesses that boycotting Israel working with Massachusetts have anything to do with you and your state? That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe you should call Representative Stephen Howitt, who filed this legislation. What caused him to file this legislation? Because really, a whole bunch of other people jumped on top of this legislation, which was to not do business with people who are boycotting Israel. Isn't it their constitutional right to boycott somebody if they choose to boycott them? Why would Massachusetts say, we're not going to allow you to use your constitutional right? Or why would state representatives or state senators support the idea that we're not going to do business with somebody who is boycotting any nation that's outside of the United States for whatever reason they choose to do that? So, again, we're talking about some of the wackiest legislation that has come across my desk in 2017, 2018. I want you to call in 508-673-1480, have a conversation with me. Talk to me about what you like about it, what you don't like about it. Tell me about additional legislation. If you're watching from anywhere in the country, call in. Let me know about some of the craziest legislation that you've seen. Type in on the J&J Jewelers Facebook Live cam. Let's have a conversation about it. Because, again, this is a direct reflection on whether your state representatives, your state senators actually represent you around the country. And we are talking about what your state legislation is doing around the country to make sure that they're representing you. Again, we've talked about a $20 fee for you using internet porn. We've talked about it being the same consuming powdered alcohol as regular alcoholic beverages. We've talked about death drones and how there's legislation against death drones in New York. So there's a whole bunch of funny ones out there, and we're also talking about how people are passing legislation based on these groups that are giving them large sums of money or paying for vacations for them that is outside of the scope of them actually reporting it to the actual states. So somebody on Facebook Live in the J&J Jewelers Facebook Live cam says, grab that cash. And you know, it's funny because that's exactly what they're doing. They also said, what's a great way to get a list of their names? You know, you can go onto your state's website and type in the bill, what the bill is about, and it will list everybody who supported it, who proposed it, and if there was a vote, who voted on it. So that's a great way to make sure that your state legislation is doing the job that they're supposed to be doing, because a lot of times we tend to do this blind, oh, they're doing a great job. We know that they're doing a great job, but do we know that? We know that they go to our garage door openings, but do we know that they're actually doing the job that we're paying them to do? Because they just got a hefty pay raise, and a lot of states are getting pay raises for state legislation because they need more demand. They need more people to run for these offices. That's the excuse that they use, but is that really the case? You're live in the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Rich. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
Yeah, we're hanging in there. I guess we've got to weather another storm coming.
Yeah, let's hope that it all goes okay and it's just rain.
I hope it goes out to the Atlantic Ocean. That's what I hope.
Yeah.
You know, the state of Massachusetts is just reporting now that they're declining revenues again for another fiscal year. They didn't reach their projections. Are you surprised about that? Revenues are down. They think the taxpayers like a well will never run dry. Well, how about cutting back your spending? Wow, that's a pretty good idea. I wonder why they're not thinking of this up on Bacon Hill. You know, a mileage tax, millionaires tax, increasing the cigarette tax, meals tax. When's it going to end? When are they going to say, hey, we just can't afford to be spending all this money, and just the taxpayers are their piggy bank, and then wonder why they're not getting enough tax revenues? People are leaving here.
Well,
business don't want to come here, Rich.
You live in Massachusetts, so there's one thing that you should be thankful for. You don't live in Rhode Island, where they're charging people trying to charge people a $20 fee to access internet porn.
No, you're wrong. We live in Massachusetts for their state reps. It's called Massachusetts.
Okay, Massachusetts.
Yeah, that's right. So you You know something, Rich? I'm going to tell you right now. Quality of life here in this state is going downhill. You look around, you see all these bridges. They're all full of rust, potholes everywhere. They just keep. Just wondering. My question is, where's our taxpayer dollars going? I know they're going for their pay raises for all their good buddies up there in Boston. But I'm going to tell you right now, how long can we survive in this state where they just say, hey, you know something? You got to pay more taxes because we just keep spending.
Thank you so much for your call. I really appreciate
it. I love your show. Bye-bye.
Hey, thank you so much. Have a great day. You're live in the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Oh, good morning.
What's up?
The legislation you were talking about the state of Massachusetts not doing business with companies that are boycotting Israel.
Yep.
Businesses from Israel.
Mm-hmm. And it's not businesses from Israel.
Why would you want this?
What they're doing is they're saying that you can't have we're not going to do business with companies that aren't willing to do business with Israel.
Right.
Okay.
So why would you want the state to do business with companies that might be anti-Semitic or pro-terrorism? The Hamas, Hezbollah. And all of that. That doesn't make any sense to me.
So
Israel's supposed to be our ally, right?
All right.
And we know that the Palestinians, put that in air quotes, Palestinians, because they're basically Arabs who happen to live in the area, because there's no such thing as a Palestinian race.
So this is my problem with the actual Israeli conversation. All right, so you just made a point. Allow me to make a point, please. So this is my problem with the actual conversation with Israel. When you talk about Israel, the nation, and you say something that's potentially negative about it, people say it's an anti-Semitic statement. Unfortunately, that's not what's happening here. Anti-Semitic is saying, I'm not going to do business with any people who practice the Jewish faith at all. That's not what's happening with this legislation.
Well,
what's
how do you
happening?
know that that's not those businesses' motivation?
And you know what? It very well could be. But there are people right now who are boycotting doing business with people who are gay. But that's okay. Like really, if we're going to say that it's good for one, it's good for the other.
Courts. I mean, if you want to get into that, we have courts saying that businesses cannot refuse to do business with gay people.
Right, but it's being fought in court.
Right.
So again, why would we boycott businesses that aren't doing business with Israel? It's not every country in the entire world. We're not saying the same thing about Russia. We're not saying the same thing about Australia. We're saying just Israel. You there? So really, really, when it comes to it, why are state legislators being paid to go to Israel and have trips in order to be able to support this legislation? And secondly, why is it okay to dictate to companies who you can and can't do business with when it comes to foreign countries?
Well,
we're not talking about dealing with Americans. We're not talking about dealing with Americans.
Trade agreements and all of that. We do that all the time.
But we're not talking.
And if a private entity wants to spend their money on sending our legislators to Israel, so they can do whatever BS fact-finding mission that I don't care, as long as my money isn't being spent on it.
So you think that it's okay?
We don't understand, right? We know that some of these businesses are pro-Palestine, right? And we know that Iran funds terrorism in the quote Palestine. So I don't understand why it's not okay to say, hey, those people over there, they're funding helping fund our enemies. So let's not.
That's not the case at all. Saying that you're not going to do business with Israel.
No.
Saying that you're not going to do business with Israel is a lot different than saying that you're being pro-Palestine or something along those lines.
Could we do this? Could we say that they're not going to do business with, say, Mexico?
How about this? How about
that? I mean, would that be all right with you?
How about this? How about if I'm in business?
No, come on, can you answer that question?
How about you let me respond and then you can have a conversation with me afterwards? You've been interrupting me the entire time. You're calling in. So allow me to have a conversation, please. So that being said, what if somebody says, I want to boycott the entire Middle East to include Israel? They would be part of the people who would not be able to do state business under this ban. So how about that? If they're saying, I don't want to do business with anybody in the Middle East because this is religion that's causing this, is that okay? Because they wouldn't be able to do business.
I think that a private business can make any decision that they want. But I also believe that our government can also make a decision on whether they want to deal with that business or not. Now, would you be okay if the company decided that they weren't going to do business with Mexico and the state said, we're not going to do business with you?
Is there legislation about it? How about we pass legislation?
Right?
How about we pass legislation? No, how about we pass legislation? So all right. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Because I'm trying to have a conversation with you. I let you speak every single time, but you want to interrupt me when I speak. How about we have a conversation? So that being said, how about we propose legislation in the state of Massachusetts that says that if a business boycotts any nation in the country or any nation in the world, we are not going to allow that business to do business with Massachusetts. That legislation does not exist. Instead, it just pertains to Israel, paid for by a PAC who's paying for your state representatives and state legislators to go to foreign countries. If that's not pay for play, I don't know what is. I thank you for your call. And we're talking about crazy legislation that's happening around the United States. And a previous caller just had an argument with me about why we should not do business with businesses that don't do business with other countries or certain countries. So specifically in Massachusetts and around the world or around the country, there was legislation that was proposed that was saying that we are not going to do business with businesses that don't do business with Israel. That was the only nation paid for by this huge PAC that had tons and tons of money. And what they were doing is they were sending state legislators over to another country. That's pay for play if I've never seen it before in my entire life. And by the way, it wasn't disclosed because it was a special expense. Because it came from other than people who donated directly to their campaign. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Rich.
How you doing today?
Not too bad. Hey, I guess one of the topics today is money grabs, and I know you mentioned about this proposed legislation in Rhode Island for the $20 pornography fee.
You got it.
Well, I don't know if you've been following this other story out of Rhode Island, specifically out of Providence. Channel 12's consumer investigator has been all over this with these speeding cameras. Apparently, the city of Providence installed so far 5 speeding cameras, which basically take a picture of your license plate if you go by and you're going above the speed limit. Well, in 5 weeks' time, these 5 cameras issued over 12,000 speeding tickets to people.
Oh my God!
Yeah, and their charge for the ticket is $95 each. So, and the overhead to the city is minimal because the camera company installs these cameras for free. The city has to pay, I guess, $3,000 per camera per month for the use of the camera, and then out of the $95 ticket fee, the camera company gets a $7.50 cut. So if you just do the math, if you take the 12,000 tickets that they issued in 5 weeks at $95 each, even when you subtract the $7.50 cut that goes to the camera company and pay the $3,000 for each for the 5 cameras for the monthly fee, you're still looking at a revenue of over $1 million for the city of Providence in 5 weeks' time.
You better be careful because if the mayor of Fall River, Jaisal Correa, is listening to this right now, the king of the money grab, then you're going to have that kind of thing in the city of Fall River, or you may have that if you have another money-grabbing mayor or a money-grabbing town selectman or something along those lines. You may have that coming up, so you got to be careful and you got to keep that on the hush because they might have a bright idea.
I guess it's been so successful. They started with 5 cameras. As of yesterday, they installed 6 more. So they now have 11 cameras around the city of Providence, and I guess the people are irate. They had people contesting these tickets in court, and they had over 2,000 people go yesterday to contest tickets at the Providence Municipal Court. They totally flooded the courthouse. I guess normally they have about 300 people a day on the docket at the Providence Municipal Court, and they had over 2,000 people show up to contest these tickets. They interviewed one guy on TV. He had gotten a ticket. He had gone 31 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone, and he got a $95 ticket. So they went to the Public Safety Commissioner and said, hey, this is nothing but a money grab. Channel 12 put it to him just like that. This is nothing but a money grab. And he says, oh, no, this is all public safety-related, et cetera. But they held his feet to the fire, so I don't know where this is going to go. There's now legislation pending in Rhode Island to totally ban or outlaw or ban these speeding cameras. So I don't know if that's going to get any legs or not. But City of Providence, in the meantime, is laughing all the way to the bank. So
what do you think is worse?
Traveling in Providence regularly, they now have 11 of these scattered around the city. So if you get a $95 ticket in the mail, don't be surprised.
So what do you think is worse? Do you think it's the speeding camera, or do you think it's the $20 fee to access internet pornography?
Well, I think the internet pornography thing is going to meet a lot of resistance, because now you're like censoring what people can do on the internet. And I mean, what's the next thing going to be? You can't look at Russian websites or political websites that are anti-American, or I don't know, that really reeks of censorship, et cetera. I mean, to be charging people to access information. But these speeding cameras, it's just, to me, it's a total money grab. They can hide behind the veil that it's a safety issue. And, there's some sort of an argument on that.
Thank you so much for your call. Have a great day.
Okay, bye.
And we're living in a post-net neutrality time when now government can fine you or charge you a fee for the different things that you access on the internet. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing today?
Good, and you?
I'm doing great. What's up?
I have no problem with... if I want to do business with Israel, that's up to me.
Right.
But I don't think our reps or congressmen and that should be getting these free trips.
Now, it's funny that you say this, because this isn't something that just happened in Massachusetts. This happened around the country. Places like Arizona, I think I saw Delaware on there. This happened all over the country. I think it was 24 states or 17 states that passed this around the country. And it's crazy, because the whole thing was funded by the Israeli Coalition for Action, and this was also the entity that was paying for these trips for state representatives and state legislators, state senators.
And I think in mass, I think they should post a list of people that are taking these free trips and vote them out.
I agree with you 100%. And here's the other thing about this. If they're doing this, it shows that your politicians are willing to be bought. So that being said, all you have to do is send a politician on a nice fancy vacation, and they'll file a bill for you, whatever the bill may be.
That's like what the NRA does.
Yeah. Well, that's what lobbying groups do in general.
Right.
And that's why the people don't have the power that they should have.
But, that's up to you and I who we want to buy from. That should not be a policy.
And I agree with you 100%. That's
okay. One other thing I'd like to say. The gentleman with the cameras in Rhode Island.
Yep.
Do you know if you get a parking ticket or a speeding ticket in the state of Mass, that if you want to fight that, you have to pay a fee to fight it?
Isn't it crazy? There's a fee for everything in some of these very, very, very liberal states. And it's unfortunate, because it's based on this idea that government knows more than the actual people do. And a lot of times that isn't the case. Watch a public safety meeting for your municipality and tell me what you think.
Because it's your right to dispute. You know what I'm saying? If I think I wasn't going through a red light or something, I think it's my right to go to court and fight that. But in order to go and fight that, because you got to remember, in Mass, if you get a speeding ticket, you pay that fine for 7 years.
Yeah.
I don't know if you realize that.
Yeah, I am aware. You get a surcharge,
right.
And that surcharge lasts on your record, and it actually increases your insurance cost. So it's almost better to try to get the ticket repealed, even by buying somebody out, than actually having to pay the surcharge on that speeding ticket.
Right, because that's a 7-year fine for one problem. I honestly am disgusted with our state reps. I can't say that a state rep has done anything for Bristol County.
And when I listen to that, I'm kind of in agreement with you. And the big thing that everybody points to is the spaghetti ramps that happened in Fall River, Massachusetts. That had to happen anyway. The previous thing was coming down. They had to do something about it. And because our state representatives listen to us, they want to take credit for that? That's absurd. Thank you so much for your call. Have a great day.
You're welcome. You too.
You're live in a legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning. How you doing?
Not bad. How are you doing today?
Good. I don't know. With all this stuff, maybe I need a crack rock with my coffee. You know what I mean?
Oh, man. man. What's the saying? Rick
I don't
James,
know.
cocaine's a hell of a drug?
These cameras, Rich. I swear to God, somebody gets me on some BS, I'm going to take a bat to one of these cameras.
You know, it's funny because they have apps, user apps right now that tell you where speeding cameras are and where cameras that are over stoplights are and where police are. And it's done through networking where you can actually drive down the road and know where all these speed traps are and where all these money grabs are. And you can actually go and download these apps on your cell phone and use your cell phone illegally to be able to find all this stuff.
You know, we're a society of sensors, right?
Okay.
You know, the sensors everywhere, the sensors on your phone, the sensors at Walmart, the facial recognition software. I mean, do you know Israel leads the world in R&D, research and development?
I do know that.
Gonna cut ties with that? Come on.
Well, no, I'm not suggesting cutting ties with Israel, but if a business decides that they don't want to do business with Israel or anybody else in the New East and they're going to boycott them, why should we stop that business from being able to do business with the state of Massachusetts or the state of Arizona or the state of Delaware or wherever else they pass this legislation? Because ultimately, if you decide that you don't want to do a business with a foreign country for whatever reason, then you should have the right to do that.
You know who we should be helping? That's been a horrible travesty to man and humankind is what's going on in Syria, Rich. Why isn't Russia and China sending their boys in there? You know what I'm saying?
Well, it's funny because Syria is being used as a pawn in the Russian-American fight. But thank you so much for your call.
Thank you.
Have a great day. You're live in the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
Good. Yeah, nothing amazes me ever since I started getting charged for runoff water. So you can charge me for runoff water. Everything else comes right after.
Oh, wait. It's going to get better. You just bailed out the campaign promise of doing away with trash bags by voting for a debt exclusion. So really, you're going to see trash bags go away, and now you're going to pay more in taxes. So when you really look at it, unfortunately, what happens is you have these money grabs to be able to make sure that government operates the way that it always has instead of having to fix the wheel, because the wheel is broken. And people can't get their head out of this is the way that we've always done it, so we have to continue to do it this way. Because you know what? The reason why places are failing, cities are failing, they're going into receivership, is because they continue to do the same thing over and over and over again and expect different results. What is that the definition of? It's insanity. So how do you feel? Do you think that your state government is representing you?
No, and I've thought about that for a long time already, and it just doesn't go up to the state. It goes much further than that.
I agree. I think it's a legitimate point to ask your politicians how they are representing you. And that doesn't mean that they have to listen to you all the time, but that means that they should be passing legislation that is in the benefit of the people that they represent, right?
Right.
And whether it's short-term or long-term, they should be able to justify it. I'd like to know why somebody can justify or proposing legislation that doesn't want to do business with people who are boycotting Israel. It doesn't make sense unless you want to point to the fact that they also coupled that with a vacation to Israel.
Yep.
How about that? So thank you so much for your call. Have a great day. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Yeah, here we go. Another money grab. Grab that wallet.
You got it.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? You got to keep moving your wallet around, and you got to keep fighting. These are people you voted for, not against, and yet they turn on you. It's amazing to me what they think they got voted into office for when it comes to times like these, and I just can't believe that they're going to do this.
Well, can you imagine if you live in Rhode Island, and again, internet pornography is one of the most accessed things on the internet right now. And,
it's everywhere.
And you would have to pay a $20 per quarter fee to access internet pornography. Now, here's the other question. Does your name go on a list that then they can give out and use for blackmail purposes to grab more money?
It sounds like a syndicate. Doesn't it sound like the mafia racket? It really does.
Well, that's
once you link to this, you are linked forever. You can't get out. Once you're linked in, you are linked in. And we're going to get you coming around the back door, or we're going to get you coming up the stairs. It's amazing. They want your money. I never seen anything like it. Recently, the Fall River Council took and hired a lawyer out of the taxpayers' money. Remember that incident where they needed a consultant and they hired one on a taxpayer's dime?
Yeah.
I mean, what the hell did I vote for you for, to hire a lawyer? I could do that myself. Vote for myself and hire a lawyer and go to City Hall.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your call. You made a very, very fair point. Have a great day. Drain, and we're talking today about how you can buy a politician, how you can buy a state legislator. You know how you do it? You take them on a vacation somewhere, maybe the Bahamas, maybe somewhere nice. You take them on vacation, they'll do whatever you want them to do afterwards. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Well, good morning, Richard. Hot topic.
Yeah, I know, huh?
Well, if you're a small business owner, you can't do that.
Do what?
Take them on a vacation to the Bahamas.
You know it. So the system is rigged in such a way where if you have more money, you're going to get more say.
Absolutely right. And, they can say what they want. I mean, how many junkets have they gone on to Portugal, Madeira, Israel? And what has been the end result of that? Have we seen anything?
You'll see legislation supporting Portugal.
Well, Manja in Portugal. He Manja here in Bristol County. Okay? I mean, it's getting ridiculous. That's why small business owners opt out.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons my wife and I did.
Well, how about this?
Workman's comp contributions went up. Insurance went up.
How about this? How about instead of opting out?
They don't get it.
How about
instead of?
Yeah, you know it. And what about instead of opting out of business, you opt out of your taxes because they're passing legislation that doesn't represent you?
Well, and then mandatory sick time, mandatory health care. If you're a small business owner, you can't, quote unquote, compete. Okay, I can't do what a major corporation can do.
Right.
I don't get the same write-offs as a major corporation. Okay.
We should do a voter referendum right now talking about how we shouldn't have to pay taxes because our legislators don't realize that we are the people who pay their bills.
Well, let me ask you this. I believe the representatives in New Hampshire serve without pay.
I don't know that to be true. I can look it up.
I think that is true. I shouldn't say that. I thought I had heard that. They are not compensated. Well, they may be compensated for travel. That's the other thing. They get compensated to travel back and forth to Boston.
They get compensated for everything. It's crazy when you look at these rates.
As a private citizen, how are you compensated?
You're right. I have to pay.
You're not.
Right. Yeah, I have to pay for everything.
They get compensated for travel time. Well, there's a lot of time on the road. You chose your profession, okay? You chose it.
Well, politics shouldn't be a profession. How about that concept?
Well, it is now. Look at the State House. How many Republicans do you have in the State House?
Well, when they justify pay raises by saying that people who may want to run for office aren't being paid well enough, they're talking about it as if it's a career. It's supposed to be a part-time job.
Well, it isn't. It's and I know it's a career. They're entrenched, never getting out. The lobbyists have bought them off. They show up here and there, act nice, take a picture up, small business open.
Well, that's the best part about it. They show up at every single garage door opening that exists. If you cough,
things they had nothing to do with.
If you cough, you may cough on one of your state representatives or state senators. But the issue is they take credit for things that they're not really doing, and all they're doing is just making sure the status quo still continues. They're not really passing legislation that benefits you.
That someone lodged a complaint that was bogus. You think he would have his intern call us and ask us about the information? No, they called the mayor's office.
It's crazy because really when you add to it, they're right now you can tell, at least in Massachusetts, it's election season. You know why? They're talking about passing legislation that only benefits elders. Why do they pass legislation that only benefits elders other than to simply mine their votes?
Well, I understand maybe in some of these cases you're talking about elder abuse and whatnot. It goes on.
It already exists, though. Elder abuse makes sense. And there's a lot of things that make sense. But when you're talking about things like bullying, wouldn't you want to make sure that everybody can't be bullied?
Well, it's true.
Really?
It's true. It's a specific.
So
they profile in a specific area of concern, and if you use conventional wisdom and you tell people what they want to hear, you're all set.
Right.
Johnson used that when he ran against Goldwater.
Well, it's funny that you say that because really, when you talk about this legislation that's currently being worked on right now, which is against elder bullying, if you're between 18 and 50 years old, the state just gave you a big middle finger. That's, in my opinion, that's exactly what happened.
I don't know about that per se, but you hit a certain, it's politics. And, unfortunately in this state, like I say, how many Republicans do we have in the State House? Would it make any difference? I think it would, okay? It wouldn't be so slanted. And now, who do we hear that may run for president?
Yeah, it's Deval Patrick.
Deval Patrick.
So it's funny.
What did he do?
You know how you get more diversity in state houses? You stop gerrymandering. But unfortunately, no politician who has the majority has the spine to be able to fight for anti-gerrymandering laws.
You know, I would like to see what would happen if we as citizens had the sand to refuse to pay our taxes.
You know,
all of us would just refuse to pay taxes.
And actually, and I've kind of done some research on this, I don't know that there is a law that says that you have to pay taxes.
If you don't, they can imprison you and they can seize your property.
Which is funny.
Doesn't that sound familiar?
But find one for me.
Doesn't that sound familiar if you go back 300 years ago?
Right.
Seize your property for not paying your taxes.
Right. If there's
unfortunately, Rick, I'm going to end with this.
Yep.
People can tell you more about their favorite sports team and players than they can about the local or state government. Never mind the federal, because they don't. You have people that don't even know who the vice president is.
Thank you so much for your call. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye.
And I want you to think about this while we go into the news break. If we are being taxed without representation, is that constitutional? And when you really look at who politicians are benefiting, there's no clearer example of them not benefiting us than going on lavish vacations paid for by PACs to pass legislation that are in the interest of that PAC. And we are talking about some of the wacky legislation that's happening around the country in 2017, 2018. And it's funny because one of the conversations that turned into is how you can buy a politician by simply taking them on a vacation to a place that's really, really nice, and they'll do whatever you want them to do, apparently. But somebody dropped on my desk, and actually I want to thank Rick from the newsroom dropping on my desk some legislation that was proposed in Rhode Island because they're one of the only states in the entire country who has a law about spare tires, and now they have the self-inflating tires. I'm sorry, they have the... I'll read it to you. Rhode Island is the only country that has a mandate on spare tires. Now that cars have self-sealing tires, they're becoming commercially available. We need to update the law to accommodate new technology. Not take away the law, but update the law. So when you really think about it, why are we having some of these... Why does some of this legislation actually exist? Do you think it's just over-regulation in general? It's over-legislation? Or do you think that there's a purpose for some of this stuff? Actually, there's another conversation that's happening right now in, let's see, it's in Florida. Lawmakers are talking about people being able to bring guns or pastors being able to have guns.
Oklahoma Stand Your Ground law, a person can legally use deadly force against a threat or a perceived threat. After last year's mass shooting in a Texas church, Republican State Representative Greg Babinec wants to extend the law to include houses of worship.
We shouldn't have to worry about these things, but we do.
Democrat Cullen Walke's wife is a minister.
If somebody inadvertently shot her, I would want to be able to sue that individual.
Under Babinec's plan, a person using deadly force in good faith in a church would be protected from prosecution or lawsuits. Jim Ryan, ABC News.
How about that? So we're talking about things like legislation to allow pastors and priests to carry guns in their place of worship. So really, we have that on top of the $20 fee for people to access internet pornography that's being proposed in Rhode Island. We have anti-elder bullying legislation. We have illegal for death drones to be used in New York. We have Texas who's saying that using powdered alcohol is the same as having an alcoholic beverage. And I don't even know what powdered alcohol is. Somebody call in and tell me what powdered alcohol is. And then we're also talking about how PACs are paying for state representatives and state senators around the country to go to foreign countries to pass legislation that's in their interest. You're live in legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning. Oh, by the way, before you start, I also wanted to talk about, and I posted this on Facebook Live, on the J&J Jewelers Facebook Live cam, the Constitution has Article 1, Section 8, and they specifically say that Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to pay the debts and provide the common defense and general welfare of the United States, but all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. What say you? You're live in the legendary 1480 WSAR.
Good morning.
Good morning. How you doing today?
All right, you?
I'm doing all right.
You know, about the taxes, Bill Benson and Red Beckman wrote a book, The Law That Never Was, And Bill Benson is a paralegal, and he's been fighting the 16th Amendment. He's been trying to get his case heard in the Supreme Court for years now.
Did you say he's a paralegal?
This guy dies.
Did you say he's a paralegal, or did you say he's an attorney?
A paralegal.
Okay.
And he's got information from the lower 48 states that proves that the 16th Amendment was fraudulently ratified. And he's been trying to get his case heard in the Supreme Court for at least 10 years that I know of. And they won't even acknowledge the guy.
Well, that's because their bills are being paid for by the Constitution, Section 1, Chapter 8.
Excuse me?
That's because the bill, the wages that everybody who's a Supreme Court justice is being paid for by your tax dollars.
Well, yeah. But
so yeah.
That's beside the point. There's another book, Fruit from the Poisonous Tree by Melvin Stamper, and he was a United States Marine Corps attorney, worked for the CIA. I mean, he's got all kinds of credentials, and in his book he proves that the 14th Amendment was fraudulently ratified, and that 14th Amendment basically turns United States citizens into corporate citizens. So we basically have no say to what any of our demands are. He basically says we don't have any rights as United States citizens because they turned us into corporate citizens, and as corporate citizens, we don't have any rights. We can't complain to our corporation masters.
And we've had this conversation about the municipalities being corporations and why that is. But thank you so much for your call. I really, really appreciate your opinion on this matter. Have a great day. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing today?
I'm doing fine. I got a few comments because it's amazing how many topics there are that we can talk about today.
I know it.
Planned legislation. Oh, my God. First off, the speeding in Rhode Island. Yeah, definite money grab, no doubt about it. There's an easy way around it, though. Don't speed. Second one, guns. Priests with guns. Is God napping? I don't know. Sending our representatives to foreign countries to do, the government handles so much of the foreign affairs. I don't want my corner store doing business with North Korea. I'll support that all the way. But don't tell him he can't do business with a friendly foreign country. Done there. School. Oh, my God. I'm watching the news this morning, and now I guess it's already started in Oklahoma, 4-day school week. So we're going to give the kids less.
Right, and you know what? That's a pet peeve of mine. If we should be spending money on anything, it should be education. Even if we have to decrease our defense budget to pay for it. Even if we have to, because ultimately that is the way we make sure that the United States as a whole succeeds, is by investing in people being smarter.
In the future.
You got it.
And the last thing I want to hit on, because I know you have many callers, is that porn. Paying for, first off, people who use porn online pay for it, most of it anyway. And the second is, can you imagine the problems that's going to create at home when mom opens up the bill from the cable company and finds out somebody in the house has been watching porno, and she goes to the husband to kill him and find out it was the son? Or what about jobs, people at work who do go online and look up this, and now companies are all of a sudden going to start opening up a can of worms there. Not to mention, you're infringing my right to privacy. Nobody needs to know what I'm doing online if I'm not hurting anybody else.
I couldn't have said it any better. And here's the interesting part. If we continue going down this rabbit hole, what happens when politicians or people who are in power in corporations start going and using pornographic websites? Is the government and people in government who sees this information, are they going to then go and use this information to blackmail them into doing things that...
It's endless. It's endless. And I just mentioned 5 subjects, and there are so many more. It has gotten so ridiculous. I heard this comment the other day, and I guess I'll never want to forget this. The problem with, people saying common sense is it's It's not that common.
You know, that's been said since I've been a little kid. Common sense isn't common. And, you know, I know it's probably been something longer than that. And when you see some of these ridiculous pieces of legislation, so, for instance, can you tell me what powdered alcohol is? Do you know what that is?
You know, I never heard of it until you mentioned it.
You
but
know,
you know what? The unfortunate thing is so many people now are going to try and find out what it is for one reason or another. Sometimes some things are just better left unsaid. You know, it's sometimes like I watch the news. I used to watch 60 Minutes and stuff like that, and they show criminals, and they're showing these thieves on how they steal cars. And I'm like, I never thought of doing that. And then I realized in one flash, you just taught 1 million people how to steal that car.
Well, here's something funny, because I know right now that there are state legislators who are listening to this show right now, whether they be from Massachusetts, Rhode Island, or anywhere else in the country, and they're cringing at me talking about the fact that the Israeli Coalition of Action paid for these state elected officials to go to a foreign country so their bill will pass.
Well, the one thing I'm glad about America is that we have the right to discuss this. Thank you for bringing up these issues, and have a great day.
You too. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
All right.
We're talking today about state legislators and the ridiculous things that they pass in the House, and does it actually represent you or not? We're talking about things like a $20 fee to access internet pornography in the state of Rhode Island. We're talking about legislation that's being proposed in New York to not allow illegal death drones to be used for hunting. We're talking about Texas, and they're saying that powdered alcohol is the equivalent of actual alcohol. And we're talking about how some of these vacations are paid for by PACs to pass legislation. Does that really represent you? You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing, sir?
I was listening to your discussion this morning. It reminded me of a very famous quote, which you may have heard from Jesse Unruh, who's considered the father of the California legislature and Democratic Party. And he was being criticized for the same thing about his members of the legislature taking money and voting that right way. And his quote was, I'm going to clean it up a little bit, if you can't take their money, drink their booze, and take their other gifts, and look them in the eye and vote against them, you don't belong here.
You know, I think that's a fair point, because at the end of the day, the money should be not be influencing your votes, but unfortunately, we don't see that.
Well, and give me the example you just gave this morning, which I had just heard about, is if somebody who went on that junket to Israel stood up in the state legislature and said, you know what, I went on that trip and I learned a lot, but I'm still voting against the legislation that group's putting up, I think that person would get a lot of respect.
And, you know, does that happen? Sure it does. But I bet that that's the minority. And I bet that the people who were picked to go on that junket was the actual people who were planning on supporting it anyway.
Well, and if somebody did that once, they'd probably never get invited again.
Fair enough. And that's exactly it. So, you know, the way to continue to go on these vacations that are paid for by the Israeli Coalition for Action is to make sure that you're doing what they say.
And again, I think one of the ways to get around this is for somebody to run for office and pledge to never take these free trips.
You know, I think you're 100% on point. And here's another interesting part is how about we as a state say that we're not going to allow for PACs to pay for vacations for elected officials?
I think that is the law in California. We have a pretty tight law about that kind of stuff.
Well, it's funny because you talk about how state legislators are stopped from actually giving themselves pay raises without a vote from the people. You just talked about this one where they can't go on some of these vacations that are paid for by PACs. Yet in Massachusetts, we're kind of actually, it's not even on the campaign finance reports. It's something that's outside of it.
And I think a politician can say, look, it doesn't influence my vote, but it's the appearance of influence we have to get rid of. And they can vote for a ban on this without admitting anything, to say, look, this looks bad, and we need to really build the trust of the public for getting anything done anymore.
And it's funny because a lot of the conflict of interest laws say if there's an appearance of conflict, then it needs to be reported. And this is definitely a conflict, and it's being swept under the rug, and they're hoping that nobody talks about it.
Well, keep talking about it. Great show.
You got it. Thank you so much for your call. Have a great day.
Take care.
You're live in the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Oh, good morning to you, big fella. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And, you know, I appreciate you calling me big fella. I'm trying to actually shrink my size because I'm on camera right now.
Very good.
My head looks like it's going over the top.
You kind of hit my favorite subject. I firmly believe that I've never met a politician who didn't see a foreign trip and just fall in love with it. couple of things. You may not remember this, but our legislature used to run it in the entire year. And on New Year's Eve, they would be going crazy trying to pass last-minute legislation. They finally decided to give us 7 months ending on July 31st. We still have the same problem, and they end up having the summer off, but they still kind of increased proportionately their salary. Now, the state, I just learned that apparently the state of Florida, with those 2 recent tragedies, apparently their legislature meets for 2 weeks. And I could be wrong about New Hampshire, Rick, and I wish someone, if they want to correct me, please do. I understand that New Hampshire's legislature meets for 30 days.
And, it's funny because...
We are now meeting for 7 months. And guess what? I believe, the same picture you saw in the paper 2 weeks ago when some of our respective state senators were taking the trip to Israel. One of them, our local fellow here from Westport, and the other one from Taunton, who has never seen a trip that he didn't fall in love with.
Well, the bill was proposed by the representative in Seekonk. So the bill was proposed by the representative in Seekonk. So a lot of the people in the Bristol district went on this vacation.
Bingo. And, I'm going to leave you with, the other subject I want to hit on, too, because it scares the bejeebers out of me, is someone mentioned this, and I've been following it on TV, the cameras in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
Now, heaven forbid the Jazzy II on the 6th floor, because he has ties to Rhode Island, if he by any chance thinks, well, listen, if we do the same thing, we could take half the money and put it into repairing potholes, and the other money we could put into my criminal defense fund.
Well,
I don't know whether or not legally he could do that, but my fear is every night that I go to bed now that he might try to do it.
It's funny that you bring up money-grabbing Jazel, because that's exactly what I said. When we're looking at things like billboards and stuff like that, that's nothing but a money grab. And now, and he's calling it new revenue. And really, the taxpayers just voted on a bailout for him to be able to do away with trash bags.
I want to leave you with a thought, and it's always bothered me, really bothered me. We had a wonderful female representative on the school committee a few years back when I first came into this city by the name of Madeline Rodericks. Mm-hmm. She was a wonderful, wonderful lady. You may remember her.
I do.
I do know how she spelled her last name, the way it's pronounced. I'm going to leave you with this thought. I don't have much respect for a fellow who spells his name one way and pronounces it another way, to become almost like, well, gee, I really don't know what he is.
You know what? I'm in agreement with you.
With that. And it bothers me. It bothers me no end.
It's a spit in the face of the heritage that you belong to. Thank you so much for the call.
Yes.
Have a great day. And you know what he just talked about is something that happens at all levels of government, and it's unfortunate. But on Facebook Live, somebody said, I just hear you say something about state legislators getting reimbursed to travel. They're using a city-issued vehicle or a state-issued vehicle. I've seen them numerous times on Route 24. And, it's funny because a lot of times state legislators and city officials are being reimbursed to take these vehicles wherever they want to take them. And it's crazy because your tax dollars are being paid being used to pay for that gas and that wear and tear and all these other things. And you have to ask yourself the question, is that a good use of your taxpayer dollars? But when you talk about all the incentives, it was just brought up about how they're in session for 7 months. What are they doing? This should be a part-time job. And somebody previous to the caller that just talked said that New Hampshire, they believe, isn't being compensated for anything other than travel. And if they are in session for 30 days, maybe they're operating more efficiently because of it. It's not the boys' club that we're having in Massachusetts or some of these other states. It's they're actually going in there to do a job. Somebody else, actually, it's the famous Jim DuPont who is talking on the Facebook page, says, after an hour or so, bluster about how the little the Massachusetts undemocratic party state legislators doing nothing. I have yet to hear you say one thing anyone wants them to do, and if they ever asked a state legislator to do anything about it. And I appreciate what you say, Jim, because you were in politics for a long period of time. But here's the issue. A lot of times, state legislators, they're really just there and they're listening, but they're not really doing anything about it. And there's tons of people who want to actually do something about it, and they're listening to this show right now. They've heard numerous people call in and actually talk about it. But unfortunately, some of these state representatives don't have the accessibility that they should have, especially when you're from a poor community. Or the second piece is people in poor communities don't necessarily know who their state representatives are. They don't even think that they can change anything. And you know what? They're probably right. So I appreciate your opinion like I always do, and we respectfully agree to disagree on this one, but I really appreciate it, and I'm sure you're going to be talking about it a little bit more at 3 o'clock when you talk on WSAR's studio microphones. The famous Jim DuPont, who has a show here on WSAR at 3 o'clock, says state legislators do not get city-owned state-owned vehicles. They get special license plates and their personal vehicles so they can park on Beacon Hill at the State House. And it's funny because you're on point. The previous person who said that it's state officials, they were talking about local officials, in my guess. They're seeing local vehicles driving around on 24, and they're having questions on who's paying for that. But also, the question is who's paying for these prime parking spots up at Beacon Hill? Who's paying for the gas, the to and fro from the State House? It's the taxpayer. So really, we should be asking ourselves the question, who is really benefiting? Is it the taxpayer? Is it the person who the politician is supposed to be representing? Or is it the actual politician because they're making tons of money for doing very little? They're making money on top of that by going on lavish vacations and being paid for to go to places like Israel, Portugal, other places in Europe, places that are destination spots. And as it was pointed out by somebody who was talking about this in the original article that was proposed, why aren't they going to places like Hoboken? You know why? Because it's not that fun. They're going to places that they could take pictures and be with camels and all this other stuff instead of actually doing the job that they're supposed to do, because then they go back and they support legislation that the PAC who paid for this is supporting, which is scary. So again, we're talking about crazy legislation that is being proposed around the country. We've talked about the $20 fee that's being proposed towards internet porn. So every single quarter, your state senators in Rhode Island are talking about charging a $20 fee per quarter for you to access internet porn. Think about the rabbit hole there. Also, it's illegal, or they're trying to make it illegal in New York for you to use death drones, quote unquote, while hunting. And also, Texas is making it so powdered alcohol is the same as consuming an alcoholic beverage in their state house. Very, very interesting. Tell me, does that benefit you? You're live on Legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing today?
We're going to weather the storm, I guess, one day at a time.
Fair enough.
State legislatures, they don't represent us, because if they did, they would be fiscally responsible, which they're not. And, we have so many problems in the states, especially here in Massachusetts, unfunded liabilities such as pension plans and social programs, and the fiscal irresponsibility goes on and on and on. Runaway spending, ballooning budgets. The bond ratings are scrutinized by Standard & Poor's and Moody's. These are credit agencies, and they determine whether cities and towns can borrow money and what interest rates.
Yep.
So if you have bad credit, guess what? You're going to pay a lot of interest for your budgets, whether you want new schools.
That would be accurate.
Whether you want to repave your roads.
And the argument actually in the 2008 crash, when they were rating some places as AAA, they weren't necessarily rating properly. They were rating based on places that were going to benefit them a little bit more so. So the question would be, are the rating agencies kind of in on it too?
Well, the rating agencies clearly judging whether you can borrow money or not, at what interest rate. If you continue to be fiscally irresponsible, you're going to pay high interest rates. You might not even be able to be eligible for bonds, for borrowing money. So what's really happening is reckless spending will lead many cities and towns, unfortunately, into receivership. State mandates that that municipalities pay certain minimum on public schools, and there are cities and towns that can do a far more effective running of manage their public school systems without the state interfering with what they're doing, because they just can't afford it. Clearly, to me, this is states. They're headed towards insolvency. And what they're doing is the state representatives, they're all shuffling around to try to find ways to increase tax revenue. The fact of the matter is it's a race to the bottom.
No, it's funny that you say that, because really when you talk about what state elected officials should be doing is they should be focusing on how to solve some of the major problems that we face. Things like welfare reform. Things like how to make sure that people have access to affordable health care. How to make sure that people aren't dying not dying because of poverty, but aren't struggling with poverty in the state that they represent. And we can go on and on and on with the lists of things. How to make sure that kids are safe when they go to school every single day. How to make sure that every kid has access to a great education as opposed to just the wealthy. So really, when we go on and on and on about the things that they should be doing at the state level, they don't focus on those things. Instead, they're passing legislation that benefits the PACs that are paying for major vacations.
It's not a popular thing politically to do, to tell the people you're going to cut the budget, that you're going to be fiscally responsible. They're not going to be. They can't be a career politician if they introduce a real fiscal budget that runs lean and reduces. It's going to reduce taxes in the long run. They won't be reelected. That's the reason why we're into this problem, because of career politicians that don't have the courage to do the right thing. So unless we have these things, the country is running towards bankruptcy, insolvency. The states running around trying to increase taxes because they can no longer run their budgets. That's the reality. And unless we have politicians who have the courage to tell the people, like you've said before, to do the right, to do what is right, rather than to tell the people what they want to hear, things will never change.
You know, I think you're on point. I agree with pretty much everything that you said. And really what it comes down to is, who are they representing? Are they representing themselves? Are they representing corporations? Or are they representing the people that elected them to office? Thank you so much for your call.
They represent themselves in large corporations.
Thank you so much.
They don't represent the average working person and or the small businesses, because people in the middle class are getting squeezed. And you know what? That's where they only can get their money from. They can get the money from the middle class. The only problem is the whole country is running towards insolvency, and they know this. So it goes on and on and on and on, and after a while, these foreign creditors, they're going to want their money. Guess what?
Thank you so much for your call.
It's going to happen.
You know, I thank you so much for your call, because I think you bring up some really, really great points and some really great questions. Have a great day. You're live and legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Well, good morning, sir.
How you doing today?
Hey, pretty good.
You're from Rhode Island. How do you feel about your state senators? Some of your state senators talking about you're going to have to pay a $20 fee to access internet pornography.
Oh, so it's going to cost you more to see Stormy.
It's going to cost you more to see Donald Trump's girlfriend Stormy Daniels. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
She probably charges more than 20.
Well, it's hilarious, because when you really look at it, when you really, really look at why this would happen, it's a money grab. A, it's because net neutrality went away, and B, it's because everybody is using pornography on the internet. Majority of the people in the United States are looking at pornography more than they look at anything else.
Mm-hmm. Everything's a grab.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And you know, a previous caller brought up, how are they going to figure out who's actually using internet pornography? Are they going to have lists of people? Can you imagine your name on a list, on your name with a list, along with Senator Gallo, who was one of the people who proposed this, or Senator Ciccone, who was one of the people who proposed this legislation, your name alongside theirs because you use internet pornography?
Listen, if today was snow, it would be bread and milk grab. Everything's a grab. I mean, the school zone, I don't know. I see that as a problem if 12,000 tickets were written.
Well, it's funny because now the state has to go down to the 5% sales tax in Massachusetts. And I know that at the State House, people are pulling their hair out. They're going to be freaking out because they're going to figure out a new way to grab this money. Well, I give them a little bit of advice. If you go to
the corporations, there's no grab there, right, any longer?
But if you go to where I'm from, Fall River, Massachusetts, if anybody from the state goes there and talks to money grab Jaisal Correa, then you know what? They'll probably find a whole new bunch of ways to be able to grab money from taxpayers.
His hands ain't that big.
You sure? You're right. His figurative hands are huge, as Donald Trump would say.
I look at it as an issue where, the speed zone, I guess everybody's picking out that 1 mile over. Well, if you're going 20 over 15, I think there's a law. What is it? 3 speeding tickets within a year, you lose your license?
Yeah, so in Providence, they have cameras that will give you a $95 ticket if you go a mile an hour over the speed limit. Yeah. I don't know if that's
school zone, man. Though it's a school zone.
So, actually, they're all over the city. What I hear, maybe it is just school zones.
Hey, listen, I get them in the mail from Boston. I mean, one of the bridges is a toll.
Yeah, so when you go into the Logan Airport, they have a toll attached to it that you don't even see. They send something in the mail for you.
Yeah.
And the funniest part about that
is then it adds up if you forget to pay for it.
Right, and that's exactly it. They hope that you miss the mail when it comes in, because then they're going to charge you a fine on top of it. It's insane.
Hey, I just tied all my trees together, so I'm ready. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you so much for your call. And the famous Jim DuPont also commenting on Facebook Live saying that the Rhode Island traffic cameras only sent tickets to people who exceeded the posted speed limit by 10 miles an hour or more. And, it's funny because actually I heard about this here on the air by somebody else calling in, and I haven't had the opportunity to look it up yet. But ultimately, you're saying that it's 10 miles an hour or more, and there was a segment in the news that was talking about how people were going to court and standing up against this for, in the news's opinion, going 1 mile an hour over the speed limit, clocked. So, it's something I have to look into because I'm hearing it from people on the air. And again, we talked about it here on the air. It was mentioned here on the air. I want to kind of dive into it a little bit more. But there's one thing that's for sure. There's a proposal right now saying that if you want to access internet porn in Rhode Island, that you're going to have to pay a $20 fee per quarter to be able to do that. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning. Hello.
Good morning, Rich. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
Good. I've been listening to the show. You got a few topics bouncing around, but I'll try to stick to 5 of them. No, I'm only kidding.
Well, the topic is crazy legislation that's proposed, but go for it.
Well, now you talk about the politicians going on trips and doing this and doing that and spending recklessly. Rich, you got to look in the mirror because these guys get elected every year.
You're right.
They get elected. Look in the mirror for the answer. You got to vote them out.
And it's funny because part of the issue is, and we talked about this yesterday actually, when we were talking about why people don't vote. They don't vote because they don't feel that they can change the system. Because
they can.
And part of the reason is because there's statistics that show that people's vote really is mattering less and less and less with things like national committee and to point out those things, and it's bringing it back from yesterday, the national committees, which make sure that the Democratic and the Republican parties can actually vote for people based on delegates as opposed to actual votes. When you talk about things like Citizens United, which is putting more money in politics to make sure that people's voice can't be heard, over and over and over again, you have these instances of where money or where people who are in power have more say than the average person, and that continues to happen over and over and over again.
Okay, I'm going to touch on the health care you brought up.
Sure.
Access to affordable health care. Okay, one small example I'm going to give you. There is basically no competition in the health care. Basically, there is none, okay? That's why it's out of control. I'm going to give you one small example. You ever hear of LASIK eye surgery?
Yes.
Okay, about 10 years ago, probably 5% of the population could afford that. It was 10, 15 grand. Do you know what it costs today to do that surgery?
How much?
It's around 2 grand.
Wow.
Do you know why?
Why?
Because it's an elective surgery and there's competition in it. People are competing for that person that wants to get their eyes, but it's not mandatory. You can have your eyes, wear a pair of glasses, put contacts. You can do the LASIK. It's elective surgery.
Well, look how much it costs to get a CAT scan. It's crazy.
Right. But you have Blue Cross of Rhode Island. It's not Blue Cross of New England. They don't compete with anybody. Do you know why? Because those lobbying groups want to keep it that way. There's no competition.
Now, it's funny. It's funny that you say that because one of the things that I've always been interested in, I know people right now who are dealing with some real ailments that could probably be helped by a CAT scan. And unfortunately, because a CAT scan is expensive to the insurance company, doctors won't sign off on it unless there's something tragically wrong. When people should have access to those things, and you know what? If they were millionaires, they would. But unfortunately, because they're working-class people, they can't get access to a CAT scan. Instead, they get sent into an X-ray over and over and over again, which only measures bones.
Yep, not soft tissue or anything,
right?
But I really have to come back to that person going. I voted yesterday on the Durfee.
Okay.
No matter, I told anybody, go vote however you want. Just go vote.
Right.
Go vote.
And you know,
okay, I'm not going to argue with. Or if you want to have a discussion about how you voted, that's fine too. Go vote.
And we're not going to do that today. It's spilled milk at this point.
Right. Okay. Now, you know what I found too, Rich? The loudest people on social networks. Go see if they voted.
Fair enough.
I'll bet you they didn't. I'll bet you lunch they didn't vote.
You know, I actually would want to find one person who did, just so you could take me for lunch. So that being said, you know, it's funny that you say that, because that tends to happen more and more and more. People complain about the actual process, but they don't actually have a say in it, or they don't put their say into the process. But when you look at why, a lot of times when you actually statistically measure whether somebody's vote matters or doesn't matter, it's showing more so that it doesn't matter. So
half a million people say my vote doesn't matter. Come on.
Actually,
way smarter than that.
More than 500,000 people are saying that their vote doesn't matter. Actually, statistically, 55% of people voted for a president in 2016, saying that 45% of people who were adult age didn't vote for one reason or another. And one of the proposals that I made yesterday is, why don't we have a national holiday every single year where the only thing that they can do on that day is vote? Yeah. They get the day off of work, and they can't have these crappy special elections that are at various times. That way, the only special interest people. Imagine if you only had one time a year to vote, and you had the day off to vote.
That's a fair point. Or I say put them at the bar rooms.
So in Australia, that's exactly what they do. They go vote, and then they all go out to the bar afterwards.
Put the voting things right at the bar room. It knocks it right off.
You got it. You know, it'd be great if I could go and vote, because I have the day off, I go hang out at Goro's Pizza Bar and Grill. Can you imagine that? Think about that. That would be awesome.
And Rich, do you know why Massachusetts might not get the attention we should get? Because we're rubber stamped blue. We're rubber stamped.
But there's rubber stamp red states too, and it's all because of gerrymandering. And gerrymandering is another way that they're making sure that your vote doesn't matter. They're making sure that they maintain their majority.
I would agree. I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but to say that somebody's vote doesn't matter, I mean, I find that hard to digest. I do.
Thank you so much for your call. Because
you're welcome.
We're getting close to the end of the show, and I appreciate your points, and I think that you are bringing a fair point. I think that a vote does matter if we can get everybody to go out and vote, and that's exactly what you're saying. So that being said, we are at the end of our show. That's right. We're at the end of our show.